Now I'm very now I'm very happy to welcome back one of the most knowledgeable college sports bettors that I know, and Mr. Brad Powers from BradPowersports.com. You can follow Brad at BradPowers7 on Twitter, on X, whatever you want to call it. Brad, man, it's summer. Here we are. I just got back from Texas. I tweeted you a photo of Texas Stadium out there. Well, you said you've been there already, but I didn't get to go in. You might have, but how the heck is it going? And are you going back out to see some more stadiums?
Yeah, first and foremost, glad to be on. It's funny how the years and months go by. I'm usually on a couple times a year, and it's like every 6 months, and it just goes by so quickly. So thanks again for having me on. I have been to Texas. I did not get in. It was a couple years ago. I was a little bit more aggressive last year and starting to like look around for unlocked gates and stuff at the stadiums. I was not as aggressive when I visited Texas 2 years ago. Good news is I am actually going back to Texas in about a month. I will try my best to get inside. I don't have a lot of high hopes though on that particular one for some reason.
I know because it's right in the city, and I'm
Yeah.
sorry, but the homeless population in Austin is pretty high. I'm sure that the lock and key might be a little bit more Brad Powers proof, right? Than
Yeah,
than
it's going to be tough. I think it's going to be pretty locked up.
yeah, absolutely. But you know what? Maybe just plant a few seeds. I'm sure. You got a good following. You're a big fan of college sports. Maybe you can just plant a seed and schedule something ahead of time or something. That'd be cool. I'll be looking forward to seeing that when you make your travels out there. I think you're starting in San Antonio and going north.
Yeah, it's San Antonio all the way up to Minneapolis. So an entire stretch of I-35. See the middle part of America. The not just two cities, L.A., New York. It's the real heart of it all.
That's right, baby. The Heartland is where Brad's going to check out. That's cool, and you'll get to see some great stadiums. Maybe even stop at this one here behind me, the good old Badgers, Camp Randall. That's
I
one of
am.
my
I
favorites.
plan on going there too. Second time around, I'll be more aggressive trying to get in there too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, I might know a few people if you need a lead in on that. So just let me know before you pop in on my alma mater. So that would be super cool to see some of your photos tweeted out about that. But hey, it is breaking into college football season now that the NBA distractions are out of the way. Well, you got the draft tonight, but whatever. The NHL is done. Major League Baseball is rolling, but hey, it's college football time. I've already started prepping, though the thing with Brad Powers is that he never stops prepping. His power ratings are just constantly evolving. There's no stop. There's always growth, and minusing, adding certain situations, and you start pretty early. But before we get into some of your power ratings and some of these teams and conferences here, kind of a general question here. What month, and I know I'm skipping ahead here, what month are you really comfortable in knowing what these teams are going to be? Now things have changed with transfer portals and things like that. What month is it that you're like, I really feel I know what this team's going to be like?
Well, it's kind of a loaded question, so it's always price dependent. And just to prove that, I mean, I made my first college football bet for this year actually back in December when somebody posted Colorado's win total at 6.5 in December. I knew Colorado enough to know that that's a little high for the Colorado Buffaloes, so I was at least comfortable at that point in early December of last year to make a bet. Generally speaking, fully comfortable, like knowing the team inside and out. Honestly, about right now, not until about this point right now is when I'm comfortable. I mean, the transfer portal's been closed now for 6-7 weeks. It takes with 134 teams about 6 or 7 weeks of deep diving them to really get a great feel. So yeah, about right now is when I'm most comfortable. Obviously, that'll change once fall camp opens up and players can get hurt and whatnot. But it's look, you went from the roster turnover to be 20 to 25% per year to now it's like 40%. So maybe that doesn't sound like a significant increase, but it is. It's an extra 10, 15, in some cases a lot more than that extra players a year that are moving to and from. So it just requires a heck of a lot of work, and it's limited me in other sports, I can tell you that.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a lot more work, but that's when you get the advantage, Brad. And that's what you always preach on this show is like, I like when there's change because I get ahead of the market. I do the stuff the bookmakers aren't going to do, which remains true. And that's why you get so much good line value. So that's a great lesson for us. So yeah, if I was going to say a month, I would have said May. If I would have guessed for you, it would have been May. I would say,
Yeah,
but
I mean, I'm making bet. I made a lot of bets in February this year because some books got aggressive in open win totals. Now, do I love all the win total bets I made in February? No, but there's quite a few that I like quite a bit. We just know we never sell those prices again. So it always
right.
depends. But generally speaking, about right now, I mean, as far as really, in my opinion, having a really good handle.
Okay, good to know. So June, we're almost to July here, so we're getting a good handle. They're practicing, things are rolling. Beat writers are writing. Well, what are some of the rule changes then for college football for 2024? I know last year we had the big bombshell of the clock running until the 2 minutes. So, what are the rule changes for this year?
Yeah, let's start with the clock. Again, we're going to further to take college football, not just the pay scale and whatnot, but it's becoming more and more like the NFL. There's going to be 2 minute warnings now at the end of the first and second half. So that's an additional timeout. Does that really change things for what you and I do? No, but the coaches that are smarter as far as clock management use it accordingly as far as an extra timeout in those situations. So 2 minute warning. I think more prominent though as far as the changes, helmet to helmet communication. So quarterbacks and one designated player on defense is going to have the ability to have the talk with the coaches inside his helmet. So we're going to see if you loved signs and you're not just a Michigan fan as far as what you can do with those signs, you're going to see less of that because we're going to see if you see the quarterback doing this a lot early in the college football season, it's because he's talking to his head coach. Now he can't talk to the head coach throughout the entirety of I think it cuts off the communication, or at least is supposed to, with I think 15 seconds left on the play clock. But they're up. That's a difference that'll cut down on all the different signboards that you'll have communicating
Yeah,
in. That'll be different to see. And then finally, again, more like the NFL, there's going to be tablets as technology grows and more access is available to advanced technology. You'll see on drives, everybody looking on the sidelines on tablets on what happened. So, what do I think of them? I think I like college football being different than the NFL, but these three rules I can get behind.
it was definitely a nice swipe there at Michigan that you shot off there. I appreciate that. And what's funny is, I mean, Harbaugh, he tries to win, and he got caught kind of doing some stuff, and there's a lot of gray area to it because I'll tell you this, a lot of coaches do that. Maybe they don't go quite as hard as he did, but you see that all the time. You see in the pros. But I'll tell you this, I love some of these rule changes too because I think it was just kind of like almost Neanderthal, like to have to just put in signs for your quarterback, and then he's kind of has to have a formation, and maybe he decides to do a run pass option or something like that from the formations that they're calling, things like that. Same with the defense, but it just seems like with technology, you kind of should have had that by now. The NFL has
Yeah.
been doing it, and now you don't have to worry about all this. Are they stealing what? Let's have more integrity involved in the game. Now, I don't know about radio frequencies and things like that, so that's a whole nother conspiracy theory that I've heard in the past about radio frequencies and how these plays are actually being shot into a helmet. Maybe you know more about that. I don't. But I think that's a great rule change. The 2 minute warning, I can care less about that. But the tablet thing is kind of cool now because you're going to get some more memes now of some of these college football
Oh
players with their
yeah.
tablets, and like the Mahomes and the Brady ones for sure. So you
Yeah,
feel
I'm
a
sure
bit
that
more.
they're not going to be given leeway to smash a bunch of the tablets like you saw them back in the day. But it'll be interesting to see how that gets handled. I will say, as far as obviously I'm for them. I think as far as actionable info, I think in some cases you could probably speed things up if you've got a capable quarterback that can communicate with his head coach in a very timely manner and get it to his the players. I think in some instances it can speed things up, but I want to know because we all know technology doesn't work all the time. I think you'll see when it doesn't work who has the plan B
Yeah,
and has his team still knows the signals when the communication goes out because we know a Tuesday night MAC game. I'm sure there'll be one in early November where the tablets aren't working because it's so cold or the communication's off. I want to see who's ready for when all that goes to shit.
Absolutely. Some of these old stadiums and communications are already bad. Yet there's certainly opportunity for that to happen, and maybe some other teams to capitalize on that. So I totally get what you're saying there. I guess just quarterback flip up his little thing, and hopefully they you can
How
still
did
read a
that
playoff.
not like? I still don't see that. I just think that's a technology that never would get old. Like just to have the wristband and just
Yeah,
look at something.
uh,
I don't get it.
yeah, that makes sense. But what's interesting about these plays coming in is that you're right. It could speed up the game. Maybe that helps the totals go over a little bit. And I guess it shuts off in 15 seconds. So 15 seconds left in the play clock. It's supposed to shut off. I don't know who controls that, but I read that too.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's interesting. Or when the play gets called, if you start calling the play, you're UTSA or somebody like that, North Texas that plays fast, maybe they shut it off a little quicker even than 15 seconds left in the play clock. So that's interesting too. So some concepts there we have to pay attention to, but nothing groundbreaking like the clocks not stopping for first downs like last year. So divisions, there's some changes now. Obviously, the conference realignment. And I read something that was wrong because they said there was 3 of them, but which conferences will have divisions this year?
Yeah, there's only one left because a lot of people, I think it was originally supposed to be 3, but everyone's made the rules to just get away from divisions, and the only one left is the Sun Belt as far as divisions. So that obviously impacts conference futures, and obviously a majority of the conferences, depending on the rules, but obviously you're going to go with the highest winning percentage, even with these super conferences where you don't play half the teams in your conference. So that'll be interesting to say the least, because obviously you had some lopsided, full well lopsided in the Big Ten area there between the East and the West. As
Oh,
far
this
as
was good for Wisconsin fans, but not now. Now
now
that
not
the
so
change
good.
happens, it's not so good because you could be playing Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Oregon, and USC on the same year, man. That's going to be some crazy schedules, but it's great for Ohio State fan or Michigan because you might avoid Penn State and Michigan for Ohio State and just play a lot of the previously Big Ten West teams and maybe some of the easier ones that you got out of the Pac-12. So there you go.
Or I'm anxious to see. Last couple of years, we had rematches, Ohio State, Michigan. Wonder how that'll go over. Well, you just played the most important game of the year, Ohio State, Michigan, and now a week later, we got to replay the game. I don't know how that'll go over well with some of the historical traditionalists in college football.
That without a doubt. Tradition is kind of going by the wayside to money anyway, is what I noticed. So we'll see how those plans develop. But we have 14 teams in the playoffs now, and that is a massive change from what we had. I've always been pro more teams. Now, there's 12 teams. I'm sorry. They were talking about 14.
Yeah, they're going to 14, and I wouldn't be a bit surprised we end up with 16 when it's all said and done.
Yeah, exactly. I think 14 is 2026 playoff,
Yep.
25, 26, something like that. But we had 12 teams this year, and I liked it because I feel like it spreads out the recruiting more. You don't feel like you have to go to Alabama if you live in Florida to win a championship. Now you're like, yeah, maybe I can stay with my family and friends and win a championship. I don't know how it's really going to happen, but here we are. How many Group of 5 teams make it to the playoffs this year, Brad? It's an interesting question because I can't see them putting 2 in. But man, what if there's 2 in the field?
One. One. This is
Well, Liberty's under. Let's say Liberty and Boise State are both undefeated at the end of the season. What do you do?
Good question. I still think only one gets in, to be honest with you. I really do. Liberty's strength of schedule is not going to be there, so Boise would get in over Liberty.
For sure.
Cinderella is going to be invited to the dance, so to speak, like the March Madness, but there's going to be a curfew. So, and I think you're not going to get 2 Cinderellas in this college football dance. I can tell you that. I think they're they're just happy to give out one, and I don't know if they're necessarily happy about that.
Yeah, you're right. I don't think I think it's more of a pity thing, but it'll make some great stories for the media, to be able to talk about them and the chance of them winning and all that. And we're gonna have to hear about it and bet against it and all that fun stuff. So maybe an opportunity for bettors in that situation. So we always got to look for that. So I think one per year is probably gonna happen. And just for that storyline. But if there's one loss for everybody, it's going to be a hell of a lot harder to get over a 3-loss Big Ten team that played a very hard schedule. So I do agree with that. Nick Saban, he's retired. Jim Harbaugh, he's in the NFL. Who are your top 5 coaches in college football?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, I'm gonna go not necessarily, who's won championships, like
Mhm.
Dabo and Mac Brown in the past, but and I'll not just include the guys that are at the absolute power programs. Guys that I respect X's and O's and handling other stuff. I will put Kirby Smart at the top. I mean, we are talking about a guy that's won a couple titles, but he recruits as well as anybody in the toughest conference. And look, he was basically one play away from doing something that no one had done in 90 years of college football. And that's winning 3 straight championships. He's lost, one game by 3 points to Alabama, and people are forgetting about that. But he'll be in the mix there at 1. Kalen DeBoer, speaking of Alabama, I'd put him in my top 5. I think he's that good. And I think, will he match Nick Saban's amount of national championships? No. But my goodness, the last couple of years, what he did at Washington is good as anybody in the country. And you compare him to other guys that will make top 5, top 10 lists. Sarkisian, Dan Lanning. He went 5-0 against those 2 coaches the last 2 years. Was an underdog. Kalen DeBoer was all 5 games, won all 5 outright as an underdog. So I think he's an elite coach. Speaking of guys that probably won't get enough credit, Lance Leopold from Kansas. Are we forgetting that Kansas was the worst Power 5 program in the country for 15 years? And now, now their win totals at 8.5 this year. They're one of the favorites to win the Big 12. And they won 9 games last year. My goodness, what a job he's done. Mike Norvell, I think, is brilliant X's and O's for Florida State. And I think in particular, he handles the transfer portal better than anybody. And I'm not talking Lane Kiffin acquiring a bunch of talent or Ohio State going out and buying players or Miami buying players. I'm talking about scouting guys that might not be known names like a Jared Verse from Albany, who they had last year, or Braden Fisk, who they got from Western Michigan. I'm talking about doing legitimate scouting, developing these guys, as soon as they get there. He's as good as anybody. So Mike Norvell for Florida State. And Jeff Brom's another guy that I don't think gets enough credit. I think he's a brilliant offensive mind. When you got Purdue playing in the Big Ten championship game, I think that's really good. And then all of a sudden you flip over to Louisville. You got Louisville in the ACC championship game in year 1. So I don't think he gets enough credit.
Yeah, Jeff Brom has been pretty good the last few years. A couple guys that seem to drop out. Dabo Sweeney, look at that, not in Brad's top 5. Lincoln Riley, he's another one. I've been thinking maybe at one time they were both in your top 5. Brad, what happened to them?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, Dabo, look, when you're not embracing something that's a major component of college football, the transfer portal. I can't put you in the top 5 if you're not going to. I'm not asking Dabo to go transfer portal heavy and take 20 guys each year. But yeah, come on, you got to take 4 or 5 guys each year. Why wouldn't you to fill out your roster? A couple of question marks that you might have. I don't understand that whatsoever. So I can't put you in the top 5 if you're literally trying to play with one arm tied behind your back, and you're the reason why you've gone from being a top 2-3 program to being okay. You're still in the mix as far as can they get to the playoff? Yeah, the 12-team playoff. If it was a 14 playoff, I would say Clemson no chance this year. So I can't put him there. And then Lincoln Riley, brilliant offensive mind, but the last, ever since they started 11-1 at USC, lost his last 2 games of that season, starting with the Utah game and losing to Tulane, and then last year was a disaster at 8-5 for what preseason expectations were. Recruiting's not going that well. This is a big year for Lincoln Riley. I'll put it this way. And when your win totals only 7.5, not much is expected of USC right now. So I can't put him in my top 5.
I'll mention 2 more. Kyle Whittingham, Utah.
Yep.
He's got to be pretty close there.
Oh, he's in my top 10.
Okay, yeah, he's in your top 10. Yeah, I think
and Riley and Dabo they're in the top. I wrote down like 10, 12 names. Dabo was one of those 10, 12 names that I wrote down. Whittingham was in there. Mike Gundy was in there. Lincoln Riley was in there. Brian Kelly was in there as far as 10, 12 names.
That was my other one I was going to mention is your buddy Brian Kelly.
He's not my buddy. I'll put it that way. He wins. I'll give him credit. He wins, but he does not win big games. I can't put you in the top 5. At least when he wins a big game, get back to me, because this guy's been coaching 30 years and has 0 major bowl wins.
Absolutely.
0.
Absolutely. Yep. Let's see what Sonny Dykes does because he's kind of creeping too. So, like him, he's got to, let's see if he can make a playoff again one of these years because what he did was almost thought about as like impossible. But now there's more playoff teams. If he can kind of get his team in there, maybe make a little noise, maybe he can kind of move back up in the ranks a little bit. So he's interesting. And I always hope for Fickle. He's dropped a little bit in my rankings personally, but we'll see what Wisconsin does. And there's nobody talking about Wisconsin this year, so I find that very interesting. And
Oh,
might
they'll
be
get talked about when they play Alabama in that game. That's a pretty big game. Not they need to win it, but they need to show that they got a clue. I'll put it that way.
absolutely they need to do that for sure. All right, well, let's move on to the give me one team, and I mean it can be group of 5, it can be power 4, whatever you think. Give me one team not in the top 25 that you think could possibly make the playoffs.
Well, I'll cheat because you said not in the top 25. Boise State, because I think they're
Yeah.
the odds-on favorite as far as the group of 5. Love their schedule. I think they'll lose to Oregon, obviously, but other than that, they'll be favored in their remaining 11 games. I like their personnel. They got this Genty kid at running back that's as good as any group of 5 player, regardless of position in the country. They also went out and got some portal guys. Malachi Nelson's a former 5-star recruit. He might be their quarterback. They got another 5-star wide receiver out of the JUCO ranks. So a lot of talent there, and I like their defensive personnel, and I like what they did to fill out their coaching staff. Dirk Cutter is going to call offensive plays. They got 2 coordinators that I like on the defense side of the ball. I like Boise State quite a bit, so that I'm cheating there and taking the top group of 5 team. If you had another team that I think sneaky good is Virginia Tech. That I think is capable of winning the ACC. And obviously, you win the ACC, you're in the playoffs. So they're not my odds-on favorite to win an ACC, but my goodness, with what they got coming back, returning production, how they finished the end of last season. They were already playing. You spoke of top 25. They were playing like a legitimate top 25 team at the end of last season. And when everybody's back, led by Kyron Jones at quarterback, that's a sneaky good team. And if you don't believe me, well, there's a reason why the win total has gone from 7.5 to 8.5. It doesn't sound like a lot, but 8.5 win total in college football, saying at the Power 4 level, is saying that you're a top 25 caliber team.
Yeah, and it's funny who's top 25 are we going by. AP's isn't even released yet.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, SMU I was going to say, but it looks like they're already in top 25 in one of these polls here.
Yeah, they'd be borderline right there in the mix with Virginia Tech.
UCF maybe too, if you want to stay with the Big 12. So those are 2 programs.
That's a sneaky one that I almost said. I think that's a high variance team. Malzahn leaves a lot to be desired, but they went transfer portal heavy. And if all these guys hit, led by KJ Jefferson, a quarterback, if they all hit, then that is a sneaky good team that's capable of winning the Big 12.
All right, good stuff. Well, hey, let's get into a few conferences here and very high level. So what I like to do, obviously, a lot of people, I'm not done prepping yet. I have more prep to do. Complete my power ratings. I'm hoping to have them done within the next week or 2. Well, let's start with the American Athletic Conference. Is there any teams that, and I know you've hit some early lines, you can mention them if you like, but is there anything that might have some current value based upon the most recent season win totals that you've seen? Or, we can even talk about a future if you got one. American Athletic Conference, what do you got?
Yeah, a team that I'm much higher on than the market, at least what it's been early on, is East Carolina, a team that only won a few games last year, but prior to that, went to a couple bowl games. Just last year, got hit as far as they didn't have anybody coming back last year whatsoever, and now they go from bottom 10 in the country as far as returning production to at least average returning production. I like the coach, Mike Houston. Nobody really probably even pays attention to him, but he got the James Madison program going before Kirk Cignetti, and he made a good coordinator change on the OC. So I think their offense is going to be much improved. Win totals 5.5, 6 for them. Shop around as always because you got the disparity in the win totals market, but I definitely like them over 5.5 and even like them over 6. You don't get me saying, too much as far as, a half win difference is considerable, but that's how much I like them. In fact, I like them if you can get anything over 15 to 1 to win the conference. I think that's everybody wants to bet a little to win a lot. I think they're could be sneaky good. Not that I think they should be the favorite in the conference, but it wouldn't stun me if this team was good enough to at least make the American Championship game, East Carolina.
I like it. I just took their season win total over today at 6. So I'm kind of glad you said that. There's a couple things. Mike Houston hired the guy from Ole Miss, John David Baker. He was
Yep.
either an assistant or offensive coordinator there. And so, anybody coming out of Ole Miss's program right there with Lane, you got to like the offense potential, because their offense was putrid last year, but their defense was actually pretty good. They
Yep.
really kept them in some games. They only lost to Tulane 13-10, and that was an interesting situation. I think this year, from a perspective of the schedule, it is wonderful because you are not playing Memphis, you are not playing Tulane, and you're not playing South Florida. And those are kind of like the three of the top teams, and they get UTSA at home, So it's like the schedule tells me this should go over. Norfolk State at Old Dominion and home against App State at Liberty. That's your non-conference. I think it's still low at 6, Brad.
No power teams on the schedule.
Not one power team on this schedule. This is one of the easiest schedules in college football. And I like South Florida a little bit. And maybe from an ATS perspective, I don't know. But the returning production is amazing. Byron Brown actually did a really good job last year, threw for a lot of yards, ran for some yards. I'm going back to the Bama game, and I know it was a fluke, and they kept him in for 3 quarters. But you know what? That's the kind of thing that gives the kids, confidence. It's like, we hung with this team for 3 quarters. I know it was a rainy day. I remember watching the game, but I feel like with their really high returning production, ranked in the top 6 or 7 returning production in a conference that doesn't return people. This conference, I looked at it this week, Brad. There is so much transfers out in the American Athletic Conference and so little returning production. You can just look at Bill Connolly's updated ratings. It is extremely low. So I think South Florida, they could make some noise. Now you got to get by Memphis and you got to get by Tulane, but Memphis was pretty even in their yards per play last year. Tulane, a lot of changes. So I like East Carolina and South Florida myself.
I haven't gotten involved on South Florida's win total yet, but I will tell you I did bet them to win the conference. So outside of the top 3 teams, Memphis, UTSA, and Tulane, I think South Florida deserves to have the best chance to win the conference. If they hit on everybody and continue to improve in second year under Golish, they're live in that conference, to say the least. And you mentioned the Alabama game. They mention it as the turning point of the program. People really bought in after that, because that was, I think, 17-3. Alabama scored a touchdown with like 30 seconds left to make it 17-3. I mean, that was a legit game that was in question in the fourth quarter as a 30-point underdog.
I was so excited for a possible upset there, man. But
because we never seen that in Alabama. It would have been one of the biggest upsets in the history of college football.
I know. Oh, they got it through, but that quarterback from Alabama, man,
Tyler Buckner. There's a reason why he's a walk-on wide receiver back at Notre Dame now.
Yeah, right. There's a reason for it. So there you go. And if you remember, Saban was mad at his starter, and that's why Buckner played. So that's what happened in that game. Probably part of the reason he retired this year, right? So there you go. No, I'm sure it's a lot of other things, but here we are. We're in the ACC, and a lot of change in the ACC, as you know, but Florida State seems to reload via the transfer portal, the opposite of Clemson. But here we are, we got Florida State and Clemson kind of looking at the top 2 teams-ish in the conference, with Miami kind of creeping there. What are your thoughts on the ACC? Is there any value there?
Yeah. First off, the 3 teams you mentioned would be my top 3 teams in a power rating. We already mentioned a couple teams that, if you're looking for long shots in the conference, Virginia Tech, I think, is a team. NC State's a team that I wouldn't be stunned if they won the conference. SMU, I didn't bet SMU just because they're moving to the conference from the group of 5 level, and I just wonder if they're going to hold up at the line of scrimmage. Well, and they didn't in the bowl game against an ACC team in Boston College. So that worries me a little bit as far as SMU winning the conference. Value inside the conference, win totals. I'm going to be buying one of the newcomers. That's Stanford. Expectations are really low with a season win total of 3.5. Okay. They won 3 last year. They were in a horrific spot last year position because they were bottom 3 in the country in returning production last year. They had a brand new coaching staff, lost to an FCS team early in the season, and still managed 3 wins. This year, they're in the top 3 in the country is returning production. So bottom 3 to top 3, nobody's had a bigger swing as far as what they got coming back from one year to the next in Stanford this year. I like the coaching staff. The schedule gets a little easier, even though they're making a bunch of cross-country trips. I think they're capable of winning 4 games. So over 3.5 Stanford. Team I'm selling because the schedule is Georgia Tech. It's the toughest schedule in the ACC. Plus, you got non-conference games against Georgia and Notre Dame, and you're going to Ireland to start off the season against Florida State, a team that drastically overachieved last year. And I just think there's some misperception about Georgia Tech because of one play, and not necessarily anything they did, but Mario Cristobal takes a knee. This team does not go to a bowl game last year in Georgia Tech, does not win their bowl game, obviously. And I think we're getting value on the win total because of one stupid decision by a coach who's not even in their program. So Georgia Tech under 5.5 wins. You're gonna have to lay some heavy juice at this point, like -160. But I like that one quite a bit.
All right, well there you go. In Stanford, I see a couple wins here. Cal Poly for sure at San Jose State at the end of the season if you need it, but you figure they're going to get a couple wins here by somebody. Maybe they still
Wake Forest at home, maybe. And look, they pulled big upsets last year. So I mean, come on, you just because they're going to be a 7-10 point underdog, folks, doesn't mean that you don't write all 8 of those games as losses, because that's what people do. Oh, loss. That's not how this works. If they're a 7-point underdog, you got to get them, 25-30% chance of winning the game outright. And when you play 6 or 7 of them, chances are you're going to win a couple of those games.
That's why you do percentages on your season win totals, percentage of each projected spread, and add those babies up, and that's what you get for your season win total. So that's the correct way, the Brad Powers way of doing things. So no, great stuff. I love those plays, and yeah, it's going to be so interesting travel in this when you have Stanford and Cal on the West Coast. It's just so far and such a different thing. So I'm going to be kind of keying in on that and seeing how this affects them. And I know teams travel a lot better than they used to, but still, it is West Coast going to East Coast, and that's usually pretty difficult. So we're going to monitor that. Big Ten, we got Ohio State back on top now that Michigan kind of flushed everybody away, but you got Oregon right there creeping. Oregon's looking pretty hot, and they get to play Ohio State. You got Penn State obviously looking there. If I were to take my top 3 teams, I would actually go Ohio State and Penn State are pretty close. Then I would probably say Oregon is next. What about you?
Yeah, pure power rating, I would go Ohio State 1 in the conference, Oregon 2, Penn State 3. It's funny, Ohio State, even though they're 1, has to play at Oregon and at Penn State. So I don't think it's a slam dunk. If they were in the same division, I'd be like, ooh, I don't know. But they're just going to take the best overall record. So I think Ohio State plays Oregon would be my selection as far as the Big Ten championship game goes.
Oh, yeah, I would assume that as well. Maybe I would swap out for Penn State, but with Harbaugh leaving, and obviously, let down type year after winning it all, Michigan's going to be probably an unders team. There's going to be probably a lot of great defense, and I'm not seeing a lot of offense out of Michigan. So that's
why I don't have a quarterback. They just don't. So I'm not buying Michigan now. You didn't hear me when you're asking me about a team. I mean, if it was 2 months ago, I would have said, let's sell Michigan. I think the word's gotten out on selling Michigan at this point.
Absolutely. And that's just how much change there is. How Harbaugh took almost everybody with him except one guy, right? Became their head coach.
Yes, they expected coaching continuity there.
Yeah.
None of the guys stayed. So they're in a bad position. And
it would have been a bad idea if they stayed. I think you win, you get out. That is just the way things are nowadays. It's you get the blame if you stay and they suck. You will be part of that list. You don't want any part of that list. You got to the top, you get out of there. That's why you don't take. It's why it's so hard for Kalen DeBoer here going into Alabama, but it's a great challenge too because he's also going to get a lot more resources. Michigan, you have resources, but they're not Alabama resources. So let's be real here. Any plays? Iowa, they're going to be that boring team again. It looks like McNamara should be back after his injury this year. Defense returns a ton of people. Are they going to be this 31-32 total on every single game again, Brad?
They're schedule lines up nicely for them. They don't play a lot of the big boys. They do play Ohio State on the road, but other than that, not a lot of surefire losses on the Iowa schedule. So provided McNamara is healthy, that is a big if. I could see them being in the mix because, let's be real. Defense is legit. Top 10 defense in the country again for them with the majority of those guys back. they got extremely fortunate last year. I mean, when you have the worst offense in the country and you somehow win 10 games, uh, I tend to think there's some regression towards the mean. So I'm not a big fan of Iowa this year. The team that I'm really not a big fan of is one of the newcomers, Washington. Obviously loses pretty much everybody that was worth a damn off last year's team that made it to the national championship game. You're in a new conference, a tougher conference, travel with a new coaching staff. You don't have a lot of depth on either the offense or defensive line. I think they struggle to make a bowl game. Win totals was 7.5. I think 7, even 6.5's out there. Obviously, always shop around for the best price, but under for me. I think it's a 6-6 type of year. So from playing for the national championship to 6-6, 6-6, I'm not sure there's a bigger drop off of any team in the country this year.
Washington dead last in returning production on offense, ranking 134th. There's not one guy that I see that was a starter last year.
No, 0 returning starters on offense.
All right. Yeah. That's true too. I do like the coach they brought in, Jed Fish. I mean, what he did with Arizona was pretty amazing. I tell you this down here, man, it sucks. You know, people want to keep a coach for a little time, and Jed Fish gone. You know, that's just how it is, man. And it would have been cool just to see how far he could have taken Arizona for those type of fans down here. So that's life. But man, I thought he was a great coach, and I think maybe year 2 is when you want to look at Washington.
Oh, yeah. I'm not panning the higher. It's just he's in a tough spot, to say the least. And keep in mind, he only won one game his first year at Arizona, and they were fortunate to win that game. And probably would have lost that game if it wasn't for COVID and half the Cal team was out. So he's not a guy. He's not Urban Meyer, and just he wins. It doesn't matter what the situation is. Just wins 8, 9, 10 games wherever he goes year one. Right. I don't see him as that.
How about the Big 12? And there's a lot of talk about Utah. There's a lot of talk about Oklahoma State. And, Oklahoma State returns a ton of guys. Cameron Rising is back finally. I kind of thought he'd come back last year, but he never did. And I'm expecting him to be healthy, but from a scheduling standpoint, it's very favorable on the Utah side. And Oklahoma State, they made the championship game. I was really happy to have that 40-1, but I hedged it before the game because I knew they had a new shot against Texas, man. And I was glad to get a good hedge in there. It wasn't fun to lay. What was it? -500, -600. I can't remember what I'd lay, but made a few units on it at least. It was nothing like 41. But then you have Kansas, like you mentioned, Lance Leopold here. This is probably the most interesting conference to me. Kansas State's just such an interesting team. You got Iowa State there, and what did I say? UCF looking good in the transfer portals. KJ Jefferson is going to be there now. You still have Sonny Dykes at TCU. I almost think this could be wide open of a conference personally.
It is the most wide open power conference I've seen. I mean, just we don't get a lot of parity. You want parity, you got parity. You got 10 teams in that conference that if we're doing a pure power rating on a neutral field are probably within 7 points of one another. The top 10 teams in the conference are that close. We never see that, at least in recent history of college football. So, this is the market. If you want, you shop around and get a nice future price on a team that's a little bit lower on the list, not in the top 2 or 3 like a Utah or Kansas State. I think this is the conference where if you want to bet a little to win a lot, this is the one to do it. Oklahoma State is the team that I'm buying. I know the word's getting out on this, but statistically they weren't that dominant. There was kind of a phony, 10-win team last year, but my goodness, they're much better this year as far as returning production. Yeah, Gundy does not look. He's kind of a lightning rod for some off-field political stuff, but I'm telling you, on the field in the last 10, 15 years, the only 2 coaches that won more games than Mike Gundy since 2007 are Nick Saban and Dabo Swinney. Have you heard of those 2 guys? That's how much Gundy wins consistently. And I like this year's team better than last year's team that made that Big 12 championship game. You get rid of Oklahoma. You get rid of Texas, 2 teams that were, from a talent perspective, superior to them. I like the team quite a bit. Like them enough, obviously, over the win total. 7.5, 8 out there. They definitely go over those, and 6.5s were out there. So word is really getting out as far as the win total here, but also like them to win the conference, and I made that bet.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and with Gundy, it's usually the guy that when he's overlooked, does good. So now he's being looked at.
That's true. He's got some expectations, but again, Oklahoma and Texas aren't there. So Oklahoma, I know he beat Oklahoma last year, but traditionally he lost that game. So that's like removing a loss on the schedule 90% of the time. So people don't think about that.
I thought that was more of a fluke game personally, but you're right. I mean, they return a ton of people. Alan Bowman's back. They're not surprising anybody this year, that's for sure. I have no comment on this because I didn't do enough digging yet, but I'll definitely take a look at it. Do you still see value in the number on Oklahoma State, or is it gone?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's always going to be price dependent. I mean, 7.5 minus, if look, if over 7.5 minus like 170, 180, I would still play that. Half wins
It's
were
over
70
eight,
cents. So
over 8 minus 120 on
yeah, I
DraftKings
would
right
still, I would still bet the over on that one. They're going to be favored in 10 of their 12 games. So uh, I like the team quite a bit. If you're looking for another team, the value, Houston, and whether the win total is 4.5 or 4, I love Willie Fritz, but have you seen Houston's schedule? They're going to be favored in maybe 2 games, and that includes neither one's surefire. Rice and UNLV, they're only about a 3-point home favorite against UNLV in week 1. I'm not sure they win that game, to be honest with you. So this is a really tough schedule for Houston, even though I love Willie Fritz. There's a reason why they fired Dana Holgerson. He wasn't recruiting at an elite level. Roster has significant holes, and they're just behind pretty much everybody else in that conference. I think it's a really tough first year for Willie Fritz. 2-10 would not be out of the question. 3-9, I think, is the most likely record. And if you shop real hard and find a 4.5, man, that's probably my favorite win total left on the board under 4.5, even at like minus 170, 180.
Wow, under 4.5. Return nobody almost on defense and no trenches on the offense. It's saying so. I'm seeing what you're saying there. Hard schedule. Yeah, that's tough because Baylor at the end, maybe at BYU, maybe that's where you get your wins. But
Yeah, I
UNLV,
don't know though. I honestly know. And Willie Fritz, kind of old school coach. He's not like a win now. He'll build it. I love Willie Fritz. I know he's getting up there in age and probably doesn't want a slow build, but he is more of a slow build type of guy. He'll build it the right way.
all right.
Not this year.
Let's go to Conference USA then, man. I hear a lot about Liberty. How here's their schedule: Campbell at New Mexico State, UTEP, East Carolina at home, at App State, FIU, at Kennesaw State, Jacksonville State, at Middle Tennessee State, at Massachusetts, who's always been the worst team, Western Kentucky at home, and then at Sam Houston. I mean, is their hardest game at App State this year?
That's the only game where it's questioned if they're going to be, an underdog in. And I got that game right around pick. There are other games that are going to be more than a touchdown favorite in every game. So it is legitimately the easiest schedule in the country out of the 134 teams, no Power 4 programs. So in order for them to get to the playoff, they're going to have to go unbeaten because, the problem is they went unbeaten last year, got to the Fiesta Bowl. Wasn't a good look. They're not going to get the benefit of that out this year if you're comparing them to like a one-loss team out of the American or, if it's undefeated Liberty or one-loss Boise State and their one loss is against Oregon. Boise State's going, folks. I'm just telling you, because of a lack of strength of schedule for Liberty. They are so much better than everybody else in the program. In the weeds a little bit, they have so much more money than everybody else in this conference. I've been to Liberty's facilities. They're really good compared to everybody else in this conference. And some of the other Conference USA coaches have mentioned this. I mean, if we're talking a budget, New Mexico State has $1 million to work with. Liberty has 10 million. Those aren't exact figures, but that's what you're dealing with here. So I never normally ever do this. I laid money in the conference futures market. Liberty was like as low as minus 165 to win the conference. I bet it. So I laid money, and it's going to be tied up for 6 months. But I think there's a good possibility they'll play a home game as far as the Conference USA title, and they'll probably be laying double digits in the game like they were last year against New Mexico State. And do the money line conversion on a double digit favorite. It's not minus 165.
No, it's not. No, minus 165 is like a 62% chance of winning right there. So, yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you. Their schedule is just way too cake. The question is just who they play. Like you said, who are they playing? Is Western Kentucky enough to make a run at them this year? I don't know. Liberty returns enough guys to look pretty dangerous here.
Oh, Saltler and Cooley are the best 1-2 punch quarterback running back in the G5. They start.
Yeah, it's true. And even though they got toasted by Oregon last year, that was more of a Oregon just really wanting to show that they should have been better in the playoffs, because they were really almost going to make the playoffs until they lost to Washington. So they kind of wanted to make a statement in that game, and they did. But Liberty, they're going to go undefeated, and everyone's going to be like, get them in, and they'll be the 12 seed, and they'll get smacked. So we'll look forward to that. Next,
if you're looking at win total, Sam Houston State's a sneaky team.
Okay.
Adjustment was tough last year, jumping up to the FBS. If you remember, they started like 0-8, but they had a bunch of close losses in that run. I think they had 5 losses by 7 points or less. They fought, clawed, and scratched, won 3 in their final 4. I think you see more of that this upcoming season. They got a coach, Casey Keeler, who's a championship coach. He's going to the Hall of Fame when his career is over with. The guy has coached in 9 national championship games at all levels of football combined. So he's a winner, and I think they'll flirt with bowl eligibility. So over 4.5 for me.
Well, I hope they score some points. They averaged 20 last year. So this was one of the most.
They got better quarterback play this year. They got the Central Michigan kid, Chase Bauer, who's going to give them an upgrade there.
They did win 3 of the last 4 games. But, it wasn't great wins, but it was something.
Rewatch the Liberty game. That's at the goal line late. They on the road against Liberty. I mean, they gave Liberty as tough a game as anybody in Conference USA last year.
All right, what's their number right now? Sam Houston.
4.5.
4.5 minus 130.
Man, it doesn't sound like a big edge, but again, half wins are 70 cents in college football. Over 4.5 for me.
Well, Sam Houston, the man to take Texas back when he beat Santa Ana after the Alamo, my friends. And I know this because I was just there. So that's I got a lot of history on who Sam Houston was in Texas last week. All right, let's move on to the next conference, and it's the MAC. Return of the MAC. Some of these projections, you got Miami, Ohio up there. Toledo is semi up there. I never liked their coach. Bowling Green, Northern Illinois. What about the MAC this year? And what are your thoughts on their chances?
Yeah, I think it's a little more wide open. I would not be shocked if a BG or Northern Illinois or Western Michigan won the conference. I mean, pure power rating, of course, Miami, Ohio, and Toledo are going to be, at least to start the season, at the top of a pure power rating. But I wouldn't be a bit surprised one of those other teams ends up winning it. So I have gotten involved on those 3 schools as far as a little bit more of a long shot, BG, Northern Illinois, or Western Michigan to win the conference. But I am going to sell Toledo, and mainly because of their coach, who I'm not a fan of, Jason Candle. What I'm really not a fan of is the lack of returning production. 0 returning stars in the offensive line. Toledo hangs their hat on their offensive line. It's usually one of the better units in the MAC on a year in and year out basis. Big fat 0 returning experience there. They also lose a dual threat quarterback in DeQuan Finn, and Gleason's certainly a big downgrade there. Defense loses some of their top players, including a first-round draft pick in Mitchell. Only the second time they've ever had a first-round draft pick in the history of the school. So you look at the schedule, it's, they're going to be favored in a lot of games, but that's okay because Jason Candle, prior to last year, I know they ended up winning their last 11 games of the regular season last year. Prior to that, the previous 4 years, lost a total of 9 games outright as a 7-point or more favorite, more than any team in the country. So if you're slam dunking, they're 7-point favorite in that game, that's a win, that's a win, that's a win. And there's one coach in the country that gives me pause on those, and it's Jason Candle, because I've seen it time and time again, losing games yet that you should.
Their season win total is 8.5, juice to the under minus. Okay, under 8.5. Shop it around. It's minus 130 here on DraftKings. They have Mississippi State. That's a loss, I would assume. At Western Kentucky,
that's a loss. I like Western Kentucky this year. That's the second best team in Conference USA.
Okay, right behind them. At Northern Illinois. At East
I think they'll be an underdog. Northern Illinois, I think, is really good this year. And they tend to struggle with Northern Illinois. I don't know. Then you're like, well, they'll be fair. The BG games are arch rival. That's come down to basically the final play of the game each of the last 2 years. And BG's better this year, and Toledo's taking a step back. So you do the math there.
Yeah, Ohio was surprisingly good last year, but they don't return anybody.
Yeah, they don't have anybody. But again, with Toledo's the one school that you cannot go, win. Because outside of last year was the exception, not the rule.
Okay, so under 8.5 for Toledo in the MAC. And that's your play that you like right now. So after the MAC, I believe we have the Mountain West. And we already talked a little bit about Boise State being pretty high up there. Malachi Nelson is looking like the quarterback, and Ashton Ginty, I believe, is a running
Yep.
back. And looks like they return 4 linemen and a tight end. So that's pretty good. I like it when they return trenches. What are your thoughts on the Mountain West?
Yeah, I love Boise State. And now there was a lot of value in this conference, but a lot of it's been sucked dry. Because a lot of it's because there's 6 new coaches, so there's a lot of uncertainty. It's more new head coaches. This conference has been around now. This is the 26th year. They never had a year where they've had 6 brand new coaches. So there was some opportunity to get involved on several win totals in that regard. As far as Boise State, to me, is a clear cut best team on a neutral field. They're at least a touchdown favorite, or the second and third best teams, Fresno and UNLV. So I have very high expectations on Boise State, and I bet over their win total. But if it's 9.5 now, don't be betting 9.5. It just moved too much at this point. The team that I do think there's some value still left, local here, and I'm not just bashing the local team because I actually like what they've done, to say the least. UNLV, I'm going under 7.5. Not necessarily that I don't like the coach. I love the coach. I love what he did. I like the coordinator, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I like their personnel. But what I don't like is the toughest schedule in the history of UNLV football, where they play 4 power teams, and then they also play the big boys inside the Mountain West. So there's a lot of expectations with a 7.5 win total, playing the toughest schedule in school history. I don't see 8-4, to be honest with you. I just they got to win every single game that they absolutely have to. And I just, where's the 8 wins? You tell me. I mean, if they sweep, they lose the power teams, they got to sweep everybody in conference. I don't think that's happening.
Well, the power teams are at Oregon State, who lost a lot last year. They're Syracuse, who that's a home game. At Kansas, that should be a loss. At Houston, and we just kind of dissed Houston.
Yeah,
a
it's
little
true. I wouldn't be stunned if they won one of those, maybe 2, but then okay. And then you got to get into conference, and you got to beat a Boise and a Fred.
Boise's at home. Boise's at home, though.
I like Boise. I went to the Mountain West Championship game.
You did.
I saw it in person, men against boys in that game. Boise was one of my biggest bets of the year, and I did not have to sweat. I'll put it that way.
I'm not disagreeing with you, but I find it really interesting that, you would circle this game because you're like, they are going to be fired up for Boise State game. But it's funny, they played Kansas in the Guaranteed Rate Bowl and lost 36-49. So it's funny they play at Kansas. So you wonder kind of if there's some familiarity there, kind of coming into this game. Now, I know you have a new quarterback and Haj Malik Williams, who came from Holy Cross, but Maeva transferred, right? He's going to USC.
Yeah, he went to USC. Yep.
He's starting there, I'm guessing. Or do we know? I don't know. I didn't look at UFC. Maybe
not going to start. It'll be Miller Moss.
Miller Moss going to start. Okay, so he's going to hope to fill in. So I just don't know how good this Williams guy is. Haj Malik Williams. I don't know.
He's okay. But, he's out of Campbell, actually. The Holy Cross kid hasn't gotten to campus yet. Matthew Sluka. I like both kids. I bet a lot of FCS football. If I had to stack rank quarterbacks in the FCS, both would have made my top 10. So 2 really good quarterbacks that they get. It's just, I didn't like what I saw defensively. And when you play that type of schedule, I don't know if there's enough quality depth there. So I just don't, that's a lot of expectations. Just because they won 9 games last year doesn't, equate a program that's at a certain level for 50 years. All of a sudden they have an historical great season. I'm always looking for regression after an historically great season.
Yeah, you're right. When there's not consistent, you definitely look for regression in that situation. So that is something that worries me, but I figured I'd talk about it. I have not made one bet in this conference, but Boise State, do you like the over their win total then?
Yeah, I mean, if you can still find an 8.5, that's as good as it gets. If you got to play 9, over 9, I like even. So
okay.
I bet them in the conference. Full disclosure, we asked to go every conference. This would probably be my least confident, would be the UNLV one, just because there was 4 or 5 really good bets that are just gone by the wayside. I mean, their win totals moved like a full win already.
Yeah, that's gone. So that's 7.5 is already juiced to the under at -162. So Boise State over 9 -120 is probably the highest you're going to go. So that brings us to the SEC. And wow, a lot of changes this year. You got Texas obviously entering the SEC. You have Oklahoma entering the SEC. You have Georgia uncharacteristically, I should say, uh, returning a bunch of guys. I mean, for a Georgia team, usually they're mostly reload, but they're actually returning a decent amount of guys, including their quarterback, Carson Beck. I had Georgia as my number one power rated team, even after the bowl season. Well, no, actually, I think I'm tied with Michigan or something. I don't know. I got to relook at it. I was really close with Georgia and Michigan, man. And I think a lot of people were. But hey, when a team like Georgia comes back, I mean, is it Georgia in the field here? What's going on with the SEC?
Yeah, last year I would have had. I mean, if Georgia played Michigan, I would have had Georgia as the favorite over Michigan, and I would have been happy to make a bet on that. Again, people just because they lost to Alabama, all of a sudden forgot that this team was on the doorstep of doing something that hadn't been done in the AP poll era back in the 1930s, win 3 straight national championships. And you mentioned it. This is the most returning production they've had in this run, starting with Carson Beck, who just so happens to be the Heisman favorite. They stacked so many good recruiting classes. I mean, they've had 9 5-stars the last 2 years alone on defense alone, as far as 5-stars. And again, 5-stars are just, only the top 30, 32 kids get 5-star ratings. It's not like they're giving them out like candy.
Right.
So there's just so much elite talent there. I like that they have some coaching continuity, starting with Kirby Smart and both coordinators. So they're number one. I know a lot of people think Ohio State deserves to be number one. I'm not there yet. I think Georgia is at least a couple points better than the Buckeyes. So they're going to start number one in the country, number one in the SEC. Second best team in the SEC is probably one of the newcomers, believe it or not. It would be Texas, who played in the playoffs last year. Although I got to say, I'm a little more pessimistic than the market on Texas. Win total is like 10.5, too high. Even though I got them number 4 in my preseason power ratings. That's expecting a lot out of them in a tougher conference. I do like Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, but obviously they'll take a little bit of a step back. And Ole Miss is a team that's getting a lot of preseason love, deservedly so, because they got a pretty stacked roster and they've kind of pushed all their chips into the table as far as going all in this year.
Texas number 5 in the On3 net transfer portal rating. I kind of like how On3 does it a little bit. We give you a little bit of a net showing who's going out a little bit more and who's going.
I agree with that. That's a strong take by you. That's in the weeds. I like it better than 247. That just counts. Well, who left? I want a transfer portal, like who out and in. And let's do an addition and let's do some math. So I do like the way they count it. It's far superior to 247.
Well, thank you, Brad. Music to my ears. What about season win totals in this SEC? That's more music to my ears.
Going to go over Kentucky 6.5 wins, something that they've accomplished 6 of the last 7 years, with the exception being the COVID season. That is the only time that they haven't been able to get to 7 wins in a regular season. Here's what I like: meat and potatoes. I know it's not sexy, but offense and defensive line really good. Top 25 both nationally in the offense defensive line. I like their wide receivers. They got a couple guys that can really, if you don't believe me, Barry Brown played like a Heisman Trophy finalist in the bowl game against Clemson. Popping the tape there. Dane Key's a good one. I like the transfer portal additions that they had at quarterback and running back. They get the chip kid from Ohio State, who I think can be pretty productive, and then Vandergrift from Georgia. Wasn't going to beat Carson Beck out, but I think he's a highly regarded kid. And Devin Leary, last year's transfer quarterback from NC State, I don't think was fully healthy, so I don't think that's that big of a drop off at quarterback. So you punch in the schedule. I know there's not a lot of slam dunk wins, but Mark Stoops always good for one upset or so. He wins the games he should on a consistent basis each and every year. So over 6.5 wins, unlike a lot of these season win totals, you don't have to lay a heavy juice on that one. So over 6.5 Kentucky for me.
What I really like about that is their home games are very winnable. They always beat Louisville at the end. I'm sorry.
They do always beat Louisville.
And they got Southern Miss, South Carolina, then Georgia. I'll put that as a loss at home, but Ohio. So you have 3 wins to start. You're 3-1. You lose to Ole Miss, then you get to win against Vanderbilt at home. You have 4 wins. At Florida, who knows what Florida's state of mind is going to be at that part of the season after their schedule. I mean, 4.5 wins for Florida. I can't go under that, but that's just another conversation. But I got them winning at Auburn or at home against Auburn. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wins. Then lose at Tennessee, home against Murray State. Heck yeah, you're up to 6. If you don't even win a road game, you're at 6 there at Texas, then Louisville at home, who you always win. I think that's a good play right there. 6.5. I'm going to join you on that one, Brad.
Yeah, there's some resistance there in the market. I don't understand it. He always wins 7 games, so Again,
Mhm.
when you beat the teams you should, and you're a little undervalued because meat and potatoes are there on the offense defensive line. I thumbs up Kentucky. Stoops has done
Yeah.
a good job recruiting too. I mean, this is if we're going just pure talent. It's a top 25, top 30 roster.
Oh yeah, since Stoops has been there, they've been moving up and up in the rankings there for recruiting. So no disagreement there. I guess the quarterback's going to be who Brock is it Brock
Vandergrift
Vandergrift?
from Georgia. He'll be fine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He'll be fine. He'll be playing with a little chip on his shoulder probably, and that's former Boise State offensive coordinator Bush Hamden is going to be playing, obviously running the show there. I can see that. I didn't dive deeply into the SEC like you have already, and so this is great. I love kind of coming up with these early ones. Well, early for some of us, not for you, but to kind of hit on these. I do my NFL early, but it's always great to have a Brad Powers around to help us along the way because he's always studying college football. And Brad, taking a lot of time. Really, thank you for coming on the show and breaking down all these conferences to us, somewhat of an extent, but the information you gave us, only one's going to have divisions. We only have one left, the Sun Belt. What do you got going on in the Sun Belt? I know this is always App State's conference. Texas State's kind of creeping as well. Then you have Troy, who lost everybody. James Madison has been impressive. What do you think about the Sun Belt?
Yeah, I think new coaches at James Madison, Troy, and South Alabama, three of the better programs the last couple of years, create some opportunity for someone to step up alongside App State. I think it's Texas State this year, so that's a team that can be sneaky good. Market's gotten on top of that. I think their win total is 7.5. It's up to 8.5, just to show you how much the market loves it. Sneaky team. They got home games against UTSA and Arizona State early. Those games are going to be very competitive. They're at home. I'm telling you, if they win both of them, this team's live as far as making the playoffs. Texas State, love their offense, love
Wow.
their returning production. GJ Kinney, their head coach, is like one of those up and comer names to know. He will be at a big time program sooner than later. One of the best offensive minds in college football today. GJ Kinney, the Texas State head coach. Value, though, that's what people are looking for. I like Arkansas State. We're going to go over 5.5 wins. If you got
Ooh.
6, that's still fine. Even 6.5. If you're getting plus money on a 6.5, I don't even mind that one. Here's what I'm seeing with Arkansas State. I know a lot of people don't like the coach Butch Jones, but
Butch Jones.
got him to a bowl game. He slow built this program. His best team was last year's team. They've stacked together 3 straight top 80 recruiting classes. Doesn't sound sexy, but at this level, that is legit. The 3 best recruiting classes each year in the Sun Belt, year after year after year for 3 straight years. This is a sneaky good roster. I like what they got coming back. Rayner, their quarterback, was kind of a revelation. He's a little jitterbug quarterback that they went to after the disasters of a start for them last year against Memphis and Oklahoma. But this is a team that I think is in the mix there. And when you're telling me the win total is 5.5 or 6, I think easily 6-6 is worst case scenario. And I think 7 wins is on the table this year.
Wow, 7 wins on the table for Butch Jones. That just makes me scared to bet that because of how much I've talked bad about Butch Jones over the past 15 years. But you're right, he's killed a couple of my bets last year, and I think I bet their season win total under and lost that last year. Come to think about it,
You
so
probably thought you were in good shape when they lost the first 2 games, like 120-3, and somehow, some way, they won 6 games last year. And I don't think it was a fluke. If you look at their talent, it's there. So
73 to
not one of
nothing
my
against
favorite guys,
Oklahoma.
but he's going to benefit. Troy's taking a major step back. South Alabama's taking a major step back on that division. And we did talk. There are divisions. Somebody's got to step up to replace a couple of those schools this year. I think that's the one.
Well, there you go. And what's funny, we usually talk about James Madison being good, but they're not. It doesn't look like they're returning a bunch of guys. And
Well, they don't have anybody. Obviously, they lost their coach. Although I do like their hire, Bob Chesney. They did get some guys in the portal. They got the most advantageous Sun Belt schedule. Go look at it. There's a reason why their win total is still 8.5, because they don't play the big boys. So I don't think they take that. They're going to take a step back from obviously winning 11 games last year, but they're not going to all of a sudden go from 11 wins to fighting for bowl eligibility. I still think it's an 8-4 type of team.
Okay, well, there you go. So, kind of in line with the market, I'm guessing, on that one. And we had a question from Jonathan Bawalda. Have you all discussed Georgia just getting here? Well, yeah, I mean, they're the top of our power rings, correct, Brad? I mean, they're the top Heisman, like you said, in Beck. And I mean, you know, what's funny, and a question I didn't ask you, and maybe this could lead into it. How well was the pricing on teams like Georgia for the playoffs? Because we have 12 teams now. A lot of times, you know, you think money line rollover if these future prices are bad. I mean, it's hard to do a money line roller with Georgia, but maybe you think Alabama's going to make the championship game. Maybe you're on the other side of Georgia. You know, I almost think like waiting in some of these situations because you have 3 playoff games for sure with the bye weeks, and with teams that don't have a bye, you have 4, right? So it's going to be more difficult.
Yeah, this is probably maybe the most actionable. I know we gave a lot of win totals and whatnot, but I think the playoff market, whether or not to make the playoffs or whatnot, and the national championship futures market, I'm going to be playing that during the season, obviously more than ever before, as long as they keep the numbers up throughout the course of the season. Because as much as I love Georgia this year, I don't love the schedule. I mean, they do have to go to Alabama, to Texas, to Ole Miss. Do I think they'll win all 3 of those games, even though I think they're number one? No, I think they'll lose one. So then we jump in after they lose one of those games and maybe bet them to win the national championship, or maybe bet them to make the playoff and see if we can get a nice price there. So I think that is a market that I'm looking to take advantage of. Value, yeah, hindsight's always going to be 2020. If I had the crystal ball and thought, oh, Nick Saban's going to shockingly, when these lines open up, keep in mind it was prior to the national championship game. We're talking early January. So you could have gotten a Georgia 5-1 and Ohio State 9-1. Had I known Harbaugh's leaving and Saban's retiring, I would have had 2 tickets on Georgia and Ohio State. I can tell you that. There's been some movement in those 2 markets.
Oh, absolutely. There's been some movement, but yeah, I mean, it's funny. You look at Georgia just to make the playoffs. It is minus
Minus
550.
600.
minus 550 here. And I think a good exercise, and you can even do this with laying juice if you have to, is write down the numbers on the top 12 teams right now, just right now to make the playoffs, and then wait for one of them to lose and just look at the shift. And then think to yourself, can they win the rest of their games? Or if they don't, can they afford one more loss type situation? Can they make their title game? Because they're taking the champions. I mean, if it's a team like Ohio State that loses, they're going to still probably make their title game. You know, it's like one of those situations where they say they lose at Oregon. You're going to get a plus money on them to make the playoffs. They're going to even
I
take
think
some.
it'll still be juiced to make it, but
I
you're not going
hope
to be
so,
laying
but
minus 550.
right. You're right. Of course. And that's what you're looking at because, yeah, you're right. Ohio State's minus 650 to make the playoffs. But, it's an earlier game against Oregon. I think it's like the second or third week. You're going to get something better on them. And it's just a good exercise to do because they're not just taking the top 5 champions of the divisions. They're going to take one at-large team. It's probably going to be the loser of the SEC title game. It's probably going to be the loser of Ohio State. If they lose their title game, or maybe they win their title
Yeah,
game.
Georgia and Ohio State can make it in with 2 losses. So, I mean, there's a reason why they're minus 550 and minus 650 to make the playoffs. They're pretty much in.
Yeah, and you can even take a look at Florida State or something like that. Maybe they're in a situation. I know their yes to make the playoffs is only plus 130. They have a little bit harder this year, but it's just be a good exercise to do because you're going to kind of see how much the lines are moving based on this. This is the first year for the books too. It's not just the first year for us. The first year for the books to put these numbers up, and I think it's an important to study and do some comparisons. So I'm going to be definitely doing that. But what you guys should definitely be doing is checking out Brad Powers at bradpowersports.com. Brad, where can we get your great information and see some of your tours from the rest of the summer?
Yeah, I think the easiest way is just follow me on Twitter, X, whatever you kids are calling it these days, at Brad Powers 7. You can get the stadium tours, you can get college football information, and if you like what you see there, you can hop on over to the website, bradpowersports.com.
Awesome, amazing stuff. Once again, thank you, Brad Powers, for coming on, and we'll be talking a little bit later this season.